Some love stories become so powerful that people stop believing they could ever end. Jelly Roll and Bunnie XO were one of those stories. Their relationship inspired millions. Together, they fought through addiction, heartbreak, financial struggles, and challenges that would have destroyed most couples. They became proof that love could survive almost anything. But sometimes the hardest battles happen long after the cameras stop rolling. And now, a deeply personal truth has come into focus that changes the way many fans see their story. On June 15, 2026, news broke that the marriage many people saw as a modern fairy tale was already over. The court documents painted a simple picture. Jelly Roll, whose real name is Jason Bradley DeFord, filed for divorce from Bunnie XO, born Alisa DeFord. The filing took place in Williamson County, Tennessee, on May 18th. The reason listed was irreconcilable differences. Just 2 words. Yet behind those 2 words stood years of history, sacrifice, and love. The documents also listed May 9th as the official date the relationship ended. And that date is where things start getting strange. On the very same day that would later be recorded as the end of their marriage, Bunnie was online sharing moments of joy. She posted videos with family. She talked about her children. She spoke about forever. To anyone watching, she looked completely happy, completely secure. Either she had no idea what was coming, or she was somehow carrying unimaginable pain while still smiling for the world. Which was it? That question still lingers. One thing is clear. This wasn't a sudden decision. Jelly Roll hired one of Nashville's most respected divorce attorneys, someone known for handling sensitive cases involving public figures. This wasn't a choice made during one heated argument. It was something that had been considered, planned, and kept private for a long time. When people close to the couple were asked about it, they repeated the same phrase, a private family matter. Simple words. But sometimes the shortest answers hide the biggest stories. As fans searched for clues, they began noticing signs that had been sitting in plain sight all along. Just days before the news became public, Jelly Roll stood on stage at one of the biggest country music festivals of the year. Thousands of people watched him perform. Yet one small detail caught attention. His wedding ring was gone. For a man who had tattooed his love and devotion across his body, an empty ring finger wasn't just an accident. It felt like a silent message. A confession without words. At the same time, Bunnie seemed determined not to let anyone see her breaking. Hours before headlines exploded across social media, she posted a photo looking confident and strong. She wrote about finally getting her sparkle back. She shared a clip of herself singing along to a song about rediscovering who you were beneath all the noise. To casual followers, it seemed harmless. To those paying attention, it felt like something more. But what was she really trying to say? To understand this ending, you have to go back to the beginning. And the beginning almost sounds too unlikely to be true. In the summer of 2015, they met in Las Vegas. At the time, Jelly Roll wasn't famous. Not even close. He was performing tiny shows for crowds that barely filled a room. He lived out of an old white van. He survived on small gigs and didn't even have a place of his own. Bunnie was living a completely different life. She happened to be at one of his shows with another man. By every standard, these 2 people should never have ended up together. Even Jelly Roll has joked about it. He wasn't her type. She wasn't his. On paper, they made absolutely no sense. But Bunnie tells the story differently. She says that the moment she saw him, something inside her became completely still. It was as if a voice quietly whispered, "There you are." Like she had spent her whole life searching for someone she couldn't describe until she finally saw his face. It sounds like something from a movie. Yet for them, it became reality. They started as friends. Jelly Roll would ask for advice about his daughter. Bunnie listened. She cared. Slowly, friendship became something neither of them could ignore. Then, on the final night of August 2016, everything changed. Standing together at a concert, Jelly Roll grabbed a microphone and asked her to marry him that very night. No long engagement. No months of planning.
No hesitation.
She said yes. The two of them drove straight to a Las Vegas wedding chapel and got married on the spot. They were broke. They had almost nothing. Yet they bet everything on each other. And somehow, that gamble worked. Or at least it did for a while. Just days before their wedding, Jelly Roll had welcomed a newborn son with a previous partner. Bunnie didn't run from the chaos. She stepped directly into it. She helped him fight for custody of his daughter. She embraced children who weren't biologically hers. She built a family from scratch while trying to build a future at the same time. Think about that for a moment. She married a struggling musician with serious responsibilities, financial uncertainty, and a complicated life. Then she chose to help carry all of it. She even got sober to create a better environment for the children. That commitment became the foundation of everything they built together. Which is exactly why what happened next hit so hard. In 2018, just 2 years into the marriage, Bunnie learned that Jelly Roll had been unfaithful. Not because of one reckless mistake. Reports later suggested the affair lasted for much longer. The betrayal devastated her. She has spoken openly about the pain of discovering that the person she trusted most had broken her heart. She left and returned to Las Vegas. To many people, the marriage looked finished. And honestly, who could have blamed her? Years later, Jelly Roll spoke about that chapter with brutal honesty. He admitted what happened. He didn't make excuses. He didn't blame anyone else. He described it as one of the darkest periods of his life. He talked about the difficult work required to rebuild trust after destroying it. More importantly, he accepted responsibility for the damage he caused. Eventually, Bunnie found a way to see the situation differently. She described their relationship as a castle built on sand that had to collapse before it could be rebuilt on solid ground. It's a beautiful way to describe healing. But hidden inside those words is a painful truth. Recovery wasn't quick. It took years. Years before she trusted him again. Years before she stopped feeling disposable. Years before the wounds began to close. Trust wasn't restored overnight. It was rebuilt one brick at a time. And just when they seemed stronger than ever, another challenge arrived that neither of them expected. Success. Bunnie transformed her life. She launched a podcast that grew into a massive success. Millions of people listened. She built her own audience, her own career, and her own identity. She was no longer waiting for someone else's dream to come true. She was creating one herself. Meanwhile, Jelly Roll's career exploded. The man who once played tiny bars suddenly had chart-topping songs, sold-out arenas, awards, and fans around the world. His redemption story resonated with millions. Almost overnight, he became one of the biggest names in music. In 2023, the couple returned to the same Las Vegas chapel where they first got married and renewed their vows. It looked like the perfect full-circle moment. A happy ending after years of struggle. But was it really? Fame changes people. Not always in obvious ways. Sometimes it changes schedules, priorities, daily routines. Sometimes it simply creates distance. Jelly Roll spent more and more time on the road. Bunnie was building an empire of her own. The two people who once survived together inside a van were suddenly living enormous lives that often pulled them in different directions. Slowly, the space between them grew. And somewhere in that growing distance, the answer to a simple question became harder to find. Who were they to each other now? Their marriage was never traditional. They openly admitted that. Both came from unconventional backgrounds and built a relationship based on rules that work for them, not anyone else. For years, that flexibility helped them survive. Then, in a 2025 interview, Jelly Roll said something that sounds very different today. He argued that there is no one-size-fits-all version of marriage. He warned that couples who try to force themselves into a standard mold often fail. At the time, it sounded like general advice. Looking back, it feels more personal. almost like someone describing pressures inside his own relationship without directly saying it. Because relationships survive when both people keep choosing the same vision. And maybe, somewhere along the way, they stop choosing the same one. But if the story ended there, it would simply be sad. What makes it heartbreaking is what they were still planning together. For years, the couple dreamed of having a child of their own. It wasn't easy. Bunnie spoke openly about fertility struggles, medical complications, losses, and emotional pain. It became a deeply personal battle that lasted for years. Then came a breakthrough. In early 2026, they shared hopeful news. They had found a surrogate and were preparing to welcome twins using her eggs and his genetics. After years of disappointment, the dream finally seemed real. And that's what makes the timeline so difficult to understand. They were planning a future together, talking about babies, celebrating milestones, appearing side by side at events. Then, only months later, legal documents showed a separation date and a divorce filing. What happened during those final months? The truth is, we may never know. By all appearances, both of them are trying to end this chapter the same way they survived every other challenge, quietly. Friends and family continue describing it as a mutual decision, a private matter. Jelly Roll has returned to touring. Bunnie has focused on reclaiming her identity and moving forward. Neither appears interested in turning heartbreak into a public spectacle. And maybe that's what stands out most. There were no ugly social media battles, no public accusations, no leaked messages, no attempts to destroy one another. Just two people who met against impossible odds, survived addiction, betrayal, fame, financial hardship, and years of trying to build a family, eventually deciding that loving each other no longer meant staying together. For many fans, that's the hardest part to accept. Because sometimes love doesn't end with a dramatic explosion. Sometimes it ends with a quiet goodbye. And after everything Jelly Roll and Bunnie XO endured side by side, perhaps that silence was the final act of kindness they could still offer each other. But here's the question that remains. Was this marriage always destined to bend under the weight of fame, old wounds, and changing lives? Or do you think something happened behind closed doors during those final months that the public may never learn about? The answer may never be revealed. And perhaps that's what makes this story so unforgettable.